On the morning of October 23, 2011, a 911 dispatcher in the quiet township of Maple Creek, Ohio, received a frantic call. The voice on the other end was young, cracking with a terror that no teenager should ever know. It was a cry for help that would tear the lid off a picture-perfect life, revealing a darkness no one in this peaceful community could have ever imagined.
Please, you have to help. It's my mom. She's on the kitchen floor. I think she's dead. There's so much blood.
When first responders arrived at 42 Elm Street, they walked into a scene of unimaginable horror. The home was immaculate. Family photos lined the mantelpiece. A child's backpack was neatly placed by the door. But the pristine kitchen told a different story. There, on the cold tile floor, lay Dr. Eleanor Vance, a beloved local veterinarian, a wife, and a mother of two. A half-empty coffee mug lay shattered beside her, a dark pool spreading from it, almost indistinguishable from the blood that stained the white floor. There were no signs of a break-in. Nothing was stolen. It was a brutal, personal violence. The first question on every officer's mind was a chilling one. Who could have hated this woman so much? To find the answer, we must first understand the life she lived and the man she loved. Dr. Eleanor Vance was, by all accounts, a woman who had it all. At 42, she was a respected partner at the Maple Creek Veterinary Clinic. Animals were her passion, but her clients would tell you it was her gentle way with people that made her so special. She had a kind word for everyone, a soothing presence that could calm the most anxious pet owner. Her husband was Mark Vance. Tall, handsome, and charismatic, Mark was a successful financial advisor with a firm downtown. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple. They had met in college and married shortly after. Their two children, 15-year-old Leo and 12-year-old Sophie, were their pride and joy. They lived in the nicest part of town, drove luxury cars, and were active members of their community. On the surface, their life wasn't just stable, it was enviable. But as investigators would soon discover, behind the closed doors of 42 Elm Street, the beautiful facade was cracking. The perfect marriage was a carefully constructed lie. In the months leading up to her death, Eleanor had confided in her sister, Clara. She spoke of a growing distance between her and Mark. He was working late almost every night, often staying downtown for days on end for business conferences. He had become secretive, especially about their finances. When Eleanor would ask about their investments or savings, Mark would become defensive, brushing her off with claims that it was too complicated for her to understand. What she didn't know was that Mark's successful firm was drowning in debt. He had made a series of disastrous investments and had taken out secret, high-interest loans to cover his losses. The charismatic financial advisor was a fraud, and the walls were closing in. He wasn't just hiding financial trouble. He was hiding another life. Detectives would later uncover a series of emails to a much younger woman, a 24-year-old paralegal who worked in his building. Mark had rented a small, expensive apartment for her downtown. He was funding a lavish lifestyle for his mistress with money he didn't have, all while telling his wife they needed to tighten their belts. The worst betrayal, however, was yet to be discovered. Just 6 months before her murder, Mark had persuaded Eleanor to sign papers for a new life insurance policy. He told her it was to secure their children's future. The policy was worth $2 million. In the event of her death, Mark Vance was the sole beneficiary. The night before her body was found, Eleanor and Mark had a terrible argument. Leo would later tell police he heard shouting from his parents' bedroom after his father arrived home unexpectedly. Mark had claimed he was at a conference in Cleveland, a 2-hour drive away. His sudden appearance was a surprise. The next morning, Mark was gone. He told the children he had to drive back to Cleveland early for a morning session. He kissed them goodbye, told them he loved them, and left his wife's body on the kitchen floor for their son to find. When detectives brought Mark Vance in for questioning, he played the part of the grieving husband perfectly. He wept. He asked who could do this. He told them about his airtight alibi. He was at a conference, checked into his hotel room in Cleveland. He seemed utterly devastated. But detectives are trained to look past the performance. They started with his alibi. While Mark claimed he was in his hotel room all night, his cell phone records told a very different story. At 2:13 a.m., in the estimated window of Eleanor's death, his phone had pinged a cell tower just 3 miles from his own home in Maple Creek. It was the first crack in his story. Then came the financial records. Investigators laid out the mountain of debt, the secret loans, the payments for the hidden apartment, and finally, the $2 million life insurance policy. The motive was no longer a mystery. It was written in black and white. The case against Mark Vance was circumstantial, but it was overwhelming. There was no murder weapon, no bloody fingerprints. The killer had been careful. But in the modern age, you can't erase your digital footprints. The cell phone data placed him at the scene. The financial data gave him a powerful motive. The final piece of the puzzle came from his mistress. When detectives brought her in, she initially lied for him, but faced with the evidence and the possibility of being an accessory to murder, her story crumbled. She admitted that Mark was with her the evening before the murder, but that he had left late at night, saying he had to go home and fix a problem once and for all. He returned to her apartment just before dawn, agitated and shaken. He had a small, fresh scratch on his neck, which he claimed he got from a stray cat. Mark Vance was arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, Dr. Eleanor Vance. The community of Maple Creek was stunned. The man they knew as a charming family man was now accused of being a cold-blooded killer.
The trial began in the fall of 2012, and it captivated the state. The prosecution laid out its case with chilling precision. They painted a picture of Mark Vance as a desperate, narcissistic man backed into a corner. His perfect life was a house of cards, and Eleanor, who was starting to ask too many questions, was a threat to it all. Her murder wasn't a crime of passion, the prosecutor argued. It was a business transaction. She was worth more to him dead than alive. The defense argued that the case was purely circumstantial. They claimed the police had tunnel vision, ignoring other potential suspects, like a disgruntled client or a random burglar. They attacked the mistress's credibility, painting her as a scorned woman lying for revenge. But the prosecutor had one more card to play. He called Leo Vance, Mark and Eleanor's son, to the stand. In a hushed courtroom, the now 16-year-old boy recounted the argument he heard the night his mother died. And then, the prosecutor asked him about his father's return from the conference. "Did you notice anything unusual about your father when he was arrested?" the prosecutor asked. Leo's voice was barely a whisper. "He was wearing his good watch," he said. "The silver one. My mom gave it to him for their anniversary. He only wore it for special occasions. He never wore it to a business conference. Never." It was a small detail, but it was profoundly human. It spoke to Mark's arrogance, his carelessness. In the midst of committing an unspeakable act, he had worn a gift from the woman he was about to murder. For the jury, it was a glimpse into the heart of a man who could smile at his children just hours after killing their mother. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned. The court clerk read the verdict. On the single count of murder in the first degree, Mark Vance was found guilty. Mark showed no emotion. He just stared straight ahead as his life officially ended. In the gallery, Eleanor's sister, Clara, wept silently, not in celebration, but in sorrow for a family that had been utterly destroyed. Mark Vance was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, but the verdict did little to heal the wounds he left behind. His children, Leo and Sophie, were the true victims. They lost their mother to a brutal act of violence, and they lost their father to an even deeper betrayal. They went to live with their Aunt Clara, who raised them as her own, but the scars of that October morning would never fully fade. The house on Elm Street was eventually sold. New families moved in, unaware of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The town of Maple Creek moved on, as towns do. But for those who knew the Vances, the story serves as a haunting reminder. It's a reminder that evil doesn't always come from the shadows. Sometimes it sits right across from you at the dinner table. It smiles in family photos and promises to love, honor, and cherish you. Why does this story still resonate so deeply? Perhaps it's because it exposes a fundamental human fear, that we can never truly know another person, not even the one we promise our life to. The Vances had the perfect house, the perfect family, the perfect life. But it was all built on a foundation of lies. Dr. Eleanor Vance dedicated her life to healing the helpless. She was a source of comfort and kindness in her community. In the end, she was the one who needed help, in her own home, at the hands of the man who was supposed to be her protector. The house on Elm Street is quiet now, its windows dark. But for those who remember the kind veterinarian who lived there, the silence still screams with the memory of a life stolen far too soon, and a trust so completely and horrifically broken.